Come on in and find a seat. All right. Glad to have you here for Sunday school this morning. I'm going to, in just a moment, turn it over to Stan because I want to give him as much opportunity as possible to explain what God has done in their lives and in their ministry and what they're doing. I just want to remind you once again that if you want to contribute to that love offering, make sure that you do that before you leave. Sometimes it's easy to forget. You get to talking and doing and get your coffee, and then it just slips your mind. And so just want to keep that in front of you if you'd like to, and we will make sure that they get that. But it's a real privilege to have Stan and Jan with us. They have been friends of, like I said, friends of Joy and I for over a decade, and I have enjoyed building on that friendship and seeing what God is doing in their lives. And if you've been here a while, you know that you've heard me use this as an illustration that we all acknowledge that sometimes we interact with people that are difficult to love. And we know this to be true, that not everybody makes it easy to love them. But it was my friend Stan who one time in that conversation said, just remember that for someone else, you might be that difficult person to love. And that was, thank you, Hal. That was a really helpful reminder for my soul that I can deal with people that are difficult to love because I'm difficult to love for other people as well. And certainly there's no one more true of that than Christ. If it were on my own merits, I'd be really difficult to love. But he loved me anyway. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us, was what Romans says. And so I have learned much from him over the years, and I'm excited to hear what God is doing now as they head into this new phase of ministry. And so, Stan, why don't you come on up and just talk to us about it. At the end, there'll be opportunity for some questions, so make sure you write those down as he speaks if you've got any of those, and we'll just enjoy this time together.
I really appreciate Pastor Lundquist giving us this opportunity. It's not something that I have done much of. I've spent a lot of time hosting people who are doing this kind of thing, presenting their ministries and so forth. I haven't done very much of being the one who's presenting it. That's kind of a new thing. As far as the difficult to love part, I was on a staff at a church, and what we learned was some people stayed in the church because of one pastor, and other people stayed in the church because of another pastor, and some people stayed in the church in spite of all of the pastors because they liked somebody else in the church. And I started realizing, I might be the person who's tough to love. And I think that was really being on staff like that was what helped me to recognize that that was the case. And then when I became a lead pastor, I realized that was probably even more the case. But we have really enjoyed having the Lundquists here. He mentioned the connection with our oldest son, Chris, and was at Faith when they were there. And we just have really enjoyed having them here with us. People will ask us about, is there a church in Pueblo that we could attend? And I say, yeah, there's a really good church in Pueblo West with a really good pastor. And so we have really enjoyed the opportunity to get together with you. Well, let me introduce ourselves. Jan is sitting on the back row of the front section, and I'm going to have her stand. She hates this, but I'm going to have her stand up just quick so that you recognize who that is. This is my wife, Jan. We got married in 1981, so we're this coming year is our 45th anniversary. We can't believe that, but it's true. I can't believe she stayed with me that long, but she has. And we've been serving the Lord in local church ministry here in Colorado for the past 45 years. We were both graduates of Faith Baptist Bible College, as we've already mentioned. We graduated in 1978, so the Flintstones were still living down the street when we graduated from Faith. But I'll tell you what, I'm excited about what the Lord's doing at that campus right now. There's some really neat things taking place at our alma mater. And a lot of people that I know who can't say that. They went to good schools, and those good schools are not good anymore, or they don't even exist anymore. And I'm just excited about what God is doing at FBBC. A little plug there. After my years at Faith, I moved out here to go to Denver Baptist Theological Seminary in Broomfield, which is now actually merged with Faith some years ago. I graduated from there in 1982 with an MDiv, and then went back to school after all my kids were grown and gone, and got a DMin at Central Baptist Theological Seminary in Plymouth, Minnesota. That was in 2021. I served as an assistant pastor at Calvary Community Baptist Church from 1980 until 1992, the end of 92, so 12 years there, and as the lead pastor at Rustic Hills from 93 until the present. Jan has served alongside me in all of those ministries, teaching at Community Christian School up at Calvary Community Baptist Church, helping me with youth and music ministries at that church, and teaching children and ladies at Rustic Hills. She's taught K through 4th grade kids in 2 different Christian schools, as well as 1 charter school over a teaching career that spanned more than 3 decades. She took an elongated break to stay at home with our children when they were little and didn't teach outside the home, but has taught both before and after that time. Her areas of emphasis and expertise are elementary education and music. So that's a little bit about us and who we are. As you may if you were here, you heard that already. We're retiring from ministry. I don't like the word retiring in one sense, because we're really not. We're just stepping into a different area of ministry, but we're stepping aside from the pastorate at Rustic Hills at the end of this year. God's provided us with relatively good health, and at the age of, I'm 69, well, we're both 69. Jan gets to 69 before I get to 69, and so she'll get to 70 before I get to 70.
You just had to put that in?
Just had to get that in there. I could give you some more, but I'll leave it there.
Good choice.
You have to sleep tonight.
Yeah. Well, I'll sleep tonight. It's just a matter of where. So we want to continue serving the Lord as long as we can. As long as our health holds out, as long as we have the ability to do these kinds of things, we want to do that. I announced at the beginning of the year that I was going to be stepping aside at Rustic Hills. So they've known this since January. And during that time, we've been praying and thinking about what God has for us in the days ahead. And several things have come into focus. One of those is that, if we go to the next slide, one of those is the idea of intentional interim ministries. This is something that is brand new with the GARBC, and we're just kind of getting that off the ground. And I was part of the first training class last week, 2 weeks ago now. So that's training to do the kind of work that we're actually having Scott Owen come and do at our church. Scott is going to come in and be an intentional interim. The word intentional gives the idea that we're not just coming in there and filling the pulpit, we're coming in to help prepare the church for its next pastor. So I did training for that with the GRBC, and that ministry is near to my heart from the perspective that my dad did this for 22 years when he retired. He retired from local church ministry at the age of 70 and did interim work until he was 92, really till he physically was not able to do it anymore. So that's something that is near to my heart. I'm also letting pastors and churches know that I'm available for pulpit supply. I haven't sent that letter out yet because there's a component of that letter that I don't know yet, so I can't send it out. I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we get near. But as time and opportunities allow, I'll be willing to do that as well. Pastors are laid up, away ministering, on vacation, whatever, and I can supply pulpits. I'll be available to churches and Christian ministries for Bible conferences and more extended speaking things if they want something different, or different kinds of speaking things. It wouldn't necessarily be pulpit supply. I did a men's breakfast yesterday for a church up in Colorado Springs. So those kinds of things are available as well. And I'm hoping to do some writing. It's interesting, when you've pastored for a while, you've done a lot of writing. It's not in a form that you can publish. Most of it's in a form like this, where you're speaking. But I would like to take some of those things and put them into publishable form and work on some writing. God's given me some insights over 46 years, and I'd like to share some of that if I can. And then this is what I want to talk to you about this morning. Jan and I are instituting Mentioned it in the early service, what we call Biblical Training International, which is a ministry to pastors and Bible students primarily overseas in settings where solid Bible training is difficult to come by. At the end of this, I'll show you some pictures from our trip to Nepal. There's no grandkids in it, I promise. It's not those kinds of pictures, but I think you'll be very interested to see the kind of thing that we dealt with over there. The name Biblical Training International is specific and focused. First of all, the word biblical indicates that the ministry is going to be focused on the Word of God. We'll be teaching theology. We'll be teaching Bible classes, Bible study methods, biblical ministry, and so forth. At times, I'll be on my own with that. When I went to Nepal back in 2024, Jan didn't go with me. At other times, I'm hoping she'll be able to go with me and to participate in some of these. So we'll be doing that. And then the word training indicates that this will be a build-up ministry to people who are interested in expanding their understanding of the Word of God so that they can, as we talked about in the morning service, they can communicate the Word of God to other people. So that's our focus in the training area of this. So that 2 Timothy 2:2, as I mentioned earlier, that is the biblical, theological foundation for what we're hoping to do in the days to come. And then the word international indicates that we're ready and willing to go overseas. It doesn't block out the idea of doing training like this here in the States. There is some opportunity for that, and I'll mention one of those opportunities here in just a couple of those opportunities here in just a moment. But the idea of doing something here in the States is not out of the question, but the idea of doing something overseas is kind of the center, the heart of this. So that's why we've used the word international. And that ministry, Biblical Training International, then all three of those words come into play. Biblical education for people in other parts of the world is difficult to come by. In some parts of the world it's not that hard, but in some parts of the world it's almost impossible. And yet there are godly leaders there who are leading other people, but they don't have the training that they really need in order to do that. In some cases, the students don't have any opportunity to travel outside their own country to secure any kind of biblical training. And one of the things that we have noticed over the years is that when they do have the ability to travel, and they come from a poor country, they come to the United States, they don't want to leave. They want to stay here. And they'll start churches for their ethnic group in the United States. And it's not that there isn't a need for that, but there's a need for people who will stay home and serve. And if we can go there and train them, then they're more likely to stay there and do the work that is needed. The other thing about this ministry is that it's designed to support missionaries in their work. When I went in 2024, I went alongside one of the missionaries that we support. My plan for 2026, the first part of 2026, is to go back with him to Nepal again and help him with that, and then piggyback off that and go to the Philippines to support another of the missionaries that we support and go with him to the Philippines and teach there. So it's not just a ministry to the people of Nepal, it was also a hand-in-hand ministry with one of our missionaries, and several more have expressed interest in that kind of ministry, and we'll talk about that here in a few minutes. So why do this? It's a lot of money. We'll talk about that here in just a few minutes, but why expend large sums of money to travel overseas? Why go halfway around the world to do this kind of stuff? Can't you teach the Bible here? Yeah, you can. And there are opportunities to do that kind of thing that even do impact people that are overseas. Most of the Bible training that you can get in the world today, you get here in the United States. In addition, there is the opportunity to teach via Zoom, when I've done that a couple of times. In fact, the Filipino trip is flowing out of teaching Filipino pastors and Bible students via Zoom. In fact, one of those also included some folks from Bangladesh. So that's a neat opportunity that's actually local and impacts people that are farther away. And while that's a profitable ministry, and I hope to continue doing that in the days to come, the opportunity for interaction after the teaching, after the class is over, is gone, because you click off Zoom and you're gone. But the opportunity to be with the people for a period of time and answer questions and to go through things and say, This is how this applies in the setting that you're in. And even to leave stuff with them is just a whole different area. So that personal interaction is valuable, sometimes more valuable than the actual class that you teach. So the problem, why do this? The problem for our brothers and sisters in other lands is they can't get here. They don't have the resources. The distance is too great, and they can't get here. And sometimes there are governmental restrictions that hamper their ability to leave the country and come study someplace else. So they labor on, often with very limited resources. One of the men in Nepal, when he came to the class, the only book he owned was a New Testament in his own language that had been supplied by the Gideons. No study materials whatsoever. It wasn't a study Bible, it was just text. And just the New Testament. It's all he had, and he was pastoring a church. So resources are often very limited, and the ability for training is very limited as well. So I've been privileged to see the mission field personally in several areas. I mentioned Nepal, got to go to Peru one year, spent some time for a week in Spain and another week in Germany, and those were with missionaries on their fields, seeing what they're doing. It's just an important aspect of, in my development, important aspect of understanding what the need is. In some of those areas, like Spain and Germany, training is available locally, but not like what we have here. In others, there's simply no training unless missionaries or adjunct professors show up and supply it. So what we're planning to do is make a dent in that area of need. That's what we would like to do. To preach and teach pastors and aspiring pastors with training that will set them up for biblical success. That's what we want to try to accomplish with this ministry. And I would say this, in many ways, this is indigenous ministry at its best. The concept behind indigenous ministry is that we train people to do the work in their own country. Well, that's what we're doing. We're training people to do the work in their own country and serve their own people. The missionary who goes in and starts a church and plans to stay there for the rest of his life and never turn it over to an indigenous pastor is not really doing ministry the way it should be done. What we're doing is training pastors who will go back in and pastor the churches for their own people. Much more effective ministry if they can train and reach their own people. And then in addition, God's allowed me to serve him for over 45 years. And those years of pastoral experience are of value to young men. Not that I know everything there is to know, I simply don't. And neither does anybody else, but I don't. But there's value in learning from someone who's been at the ropes for a while. The idea of sharing what God has taught me with men who will labor in settings that I will never be able to reach for years beyond my lifetime, should Jesus tarry, excites me and energizes me for this ministry. So where can we go? What areas of the world are possibilities for this ministry? Well, there are some places that Americans are not allowed to go, especially American Christians. In fact, in some places, American Christians, if they go there to minister, have to have some other line of work that they're going there to do. I'm going to teach English, or I'm going to do something else in order to be allowed into the country. But there are areas of possibility for this ministry. And while I can't read God's mind as to where he's going to send us next, or what the world is going to look like a year from now, and what countries we would be allowed into and what we wouldn't be allowed into, I can give you a snapshot of what may be on the horizon as we sit here this morning. I mentioned Nepal, so Asia is an area. God allowed me to teach eschatology to 2 different cohorts, both of which graduated, which was a lot of fun to see that. They put on those robes and those hats, and they were just, to actually graduate from a school was like, whoa, I have accomplished something. And they had. Some of those men would travel 14, 16 hours to get to where the training was, and it was not a simple thing to do. So Nepal was an opportunity. I'm scheduled to go back in February and teach eschatology again, along with Old Testament historical books. And I mentioned that God has allowed me to teach Filipino pastors and students on Zoom, and they've requested that I come to the Philippines on the heels of the Nepal trip. So we would go to Nepal, and then from Nepal to the Philippines. and teach on subjects related to evangelism and God's sovereignty. That's an area of concern for them right now. How do we balance these two things? Another of our missionaries, Kenneth Wells, has discussed with me the possibility of teaching not only in an overseas setting in South America, but also digitally, so that he could use those things more expansively, even if we can't go. That's still tentative. That hasn't been set up yet, but that's a discussion that I've been having. Another of our missionaries, Kent Albright, who is with Baptist Mid-Missions. I noticed that your missionary today was with Baptist Mid-Missions. Kent is in Spain. We have been to Spain and been on the field with him, and he is involved in a teaching ministry along with a church planting ministry. And so he and I have had a discussion about the possibility of coming. Still tentative, but we've talked about it. I've had discussions with Scott Willicat, who heads up what's called the Pastoral Enrichment Program, PEP for short, PEP, with Baptist Missions, about the possibility of serving with them on some of the trips that they take. Right now that ministry is on hold because some of the places that they go have been impacted by some of the back and forth that has taken place between the American government and the governments in those places. Chad would be one of them. Our government has said that people from Chad can't travel here, and so the people from Chad have said, well, then you can't come here either. And so there's been some of that back and forth that has put some of that on hold, but they're hoping to get that opened up again soon. A couple of IFCA pastors in Colorado Springs have inquired whether I would be willing to go to Ukraine and Uganda. The Uganda, I guess is how you say that. The Uganda possibility just actually surfaced yesterday. I recently had a conversation with the leader of Faith Baptist Mission out of Eagle Lake, Florida. It's a ministry of Faith Baptist Church down there, and there's some teaching possibilities that may surface from that conversation, and all of that is happening before we actually start the ministry. So there are things that are percolating. One of them is, looks like it's going to happen, but, or actually two of them back to back. But there are things that are percolating that could expand this significantly in the days to come. I might mention this, and you can pray about this. When I went to Nepal in 2024, it was technically illegal to do what we were doing, but nobody cared. They're starting to care more. So now they're starting to ask tourists, why are you here? Where are you going? What are you doing? And we're going to track you. So that Nepal trip could be a more difficult kind of trip this time around than it was before. After that law went into effect, Tom Carr, who is the missionary that I would be going with, Tom Carr made a trip, and they were able to do it and pulled it off without any difficulty. So we're looking at February and saying it's probably going to be just fine, but there is that possibility. So you can pray about that. Now, none of this happens without prayer and financial support from God's people. Unlike traditional missionaries who are sent out by and under a church and an agency, I don't have a set amount of support that I need. It's not like I can say, here's my percentage of what I need. But here's what I do know. A teaching trip to Nepal costs about $5,000. The travel, and then in addition to that, we buy all of the supplies because they can't afford to. So we buy all of the food that's going to be served to everybody that's there for that entire week. We buy all of the supplies that are going to be needed. We bring in everything that we need in order to do the trip. So the travel is part of that, and then all of the supplies for everything that we're doing while we're there is a part of that as well. That's about as much as any one trip would cost for a person to go. Others will likely cost less, especially if they're in this hemisphere. Some of them possibly could cost more, but that's probably about the high end. My prayer is that God will allow me, and sometimes Jan and I both, to make 2 to 3 trips per year. So what we're looking at and I might mention that that's not just so that we can be together. The people in Nepal as well as in the Philippines have asked, can you bring your wife? They want to see her. They want to have the benefit of her years of experience and her ability to teach and those kinds of things as well. So it's not just a matter of saying, we want to go on a trip together. It's a matter of them asking to have her come along. So what I'm praying is that God will supply between $10,000 and $15,000 a year in order to carry on this ministry. Though I'm not a missionary in the classic sense of the word, let me phrase it this way. I'm in the process of being sent out The church hasn't finalized that yet, but Rustic Hills is in the process of sending us out as missionaries, if you will. So that would be my sending church. And I'm also working toward a ministry relationship with what's called Global Fit Partners, which is something that's been set up by Baptist Missions to help people like me who are not lifetime, full-time missionaries, but people that can go out and serve in ways that would impact missionaries on the field and pastors and churches on those fields. And so that's a financial management and accountability program for non-traditional missionaries that I'm working to get set up. I've already given them all the information that they need from me. They're working through the references, and I'm hoping to hear from them at any time. I haven't yet heard the final word, so both of these, that's the reason there's an asterisk up there. Both of these are still in the works, but that's the plan right now. I don't know how long God will allow us to travel in this manner. We're not in our 20s or 30s, and we don't have decades in front of us that we can do this. So we're taking this basically a year or two at a time, asking God to supply our needs, keep us healthy so that we can do this kind of work into the foreseeable future. And we would be honored to have you part of our prayer, and if God so leads, part of our financial ministry team. So let me show you some pictures, and then we'll open up some time for some questions. These are pictures from the 2024 trip to Nepal. When we flew from the United States, we flew on Qatar Airlines, which is, whoa, really nice. And we flew all the way to Qatar, Doha, Qatar, and then from there to Kathmandu. And that was the last of the luxury. Go ahead and go to the next slide. While I was there, Jan was back here, and she went and visited our son Chris in Columbus, Ohio, and they went and visited an Nepali church in Columbus. And the next picture shows Jan and Chris with the pastor and his wife from that Nepali church who are in Columbus, Ohio. Okay, keep going. One of the things that you'll see in Nepal is the ever-present pagodas. They're all over the place. This is just outside of a restaurant, and there's 3 of them sitting right there. Nepal is largely Hindu, although, go ahead and go to the next slide. Oh, there's another, yeah, this is out in the sticks, and you have this great big statue of one of the gods, one of the Hindu gods, and people flowing in and out of there to do their Hindu worship. The other thing about Nepal is it is the birthplace of Buddha. So even though Hinduism is largely the religion of the people that are in Nepal, Buddha is also a big part of what goes on in Nepal. Before we get to this, I'll just say, any electricians in the audience?
The guy who took that picture.
Yeah. Well, I'll get back to that one in just a second. So there's something of a syncretistic approach. There's a little bit of Buddha and a lot of Hindu. Nepal sits, if you're not familiar with the geography, Nepal sits sort of as a buffer between India and China. The Himalayas are on the China side. Most of the work that we did was on the India side. So where we were, a lot more populous, a lot flatter. The elevation of Kathmandu is about the same as Colorado Springs. So it is elevated, but it's not nearly as up high as the Himalayas over on the other side. So I just took this picture because I had seen this in one of Tom's presentations, and I just couldn't believe it until I got over there and saw it. There are no boxes for electricity. It just all flows into that rat's nest and then flows out again. It's amazing that anybody's lights come on. And this is not isolated. You see this all over the place. It's amazing. The next slide. That was just human interest. This is one of the streets in Kathmandu, and you'll see people somewhat similar to what we see in some of our metropolitan areas today, where you have living quarters on top and you have the shops on the bottom. And the shops are all open air. In February and March, it'll be in the 70s. We don't go in, Tom doesn't go in April and May typically because it's usually in the 100s. Very warm, very hot in that part of the world. Okay, next slide. And America makes its inroads. I have to say this, I never saw a McDonald's, but when I saw a KFC, I had to snap a shot. That's actually in a mall area that was very much Western in its approach, but very different from what we normally would see in Nepal. Next slide. In Nepal, most people ride motorbikes because you can't afford a car. We're familiar with tariffs now. Nepal has a 100% tariff on cars. They don't build any in the country. They build them in India, but if you import a $20,000 vehicle, it costs $40,000, and Nepal is in the top 5% of poorest nations in the world. So most people can't afford a car. They can buy a bike, which is manufactured in Nepal. They can buy a bike for 10% or less than what they can buy a car. And so they'll pack, you can see this couple they're coming back from the store or someplace. She has a big bag on her lap. He's got a big bag between his legs. I saw as many as 5 people on one bike that size, all of them carrying baggage. The one person was not carrying a bag like that, was carrying a child. So you had 4 adults and a child and 4 bags just packed on this one, and they're all over the place. In the background, you can see something else, and that's bicycle rickshaws, and that's a very popular thing in the metropolitan areas in Nepal as well. Okay, next slide. This thing's called a tuk-tuk, and it's called that because that's what it sounds like. And it's a little taxi. When we were in Manahari, this tuk-tuk got us back and forth from our hotel, put that word hotel in quotes, from our hotel to the church where we were doing the teaching. So it's a little 2-person taxi, 3-person. The driver is the one, and then you can put 2 people in the back seat. From Manahari, we flew to Janakpur. It was not from Kathmandu, we flew to Manahari. And so it wasn't a quick drive kind of thing. We had to fly. So this was the airplane that we flew on. We got on and thanked the Lord that we knew Christ, because we weren't really sure we were going to land. This is, go ahead to the next slide. This is an older plane. You can see it's a turboprop. And so very different from the Qatar Airlines thing that we came in on. All right, next slide. This young man is training for ministry. He was in the church in Kathmandu that we attended when we first landed. And I took that picture with him because I was just excited about the fact that here's a young guy that's training for ministry. Wasn't going to be in any of our classes because we were teaching in other areas, but it was just a neat slide. And you'll see that if you pick up the brochure, I put that in there. And we trained young men, like the one on the left, and older men, like the one on the right. Both of them were in my class in Manahari. The man on the left is the pastor of the church where we were teaching, and fluent in English as well as Nepali, so he was one of our interpreters, and just a really a dynamic pastor. Next slide. That was our teaching team. From left to right, you'll see 5 Americans and then 2 Nepali men. Those 2 Nepali men were our interpreters. And what you see around our necks is the welcome scarf. It's kind of like a lei. And if you go to Hawaii, they would give you a lei. Well, when you go to Nepal, they give you this scarf and welcome you to Nepal. What you see over our heads are, even though we were there in March, that's still their Christmas decorations. You can see the tree in the background. Okay, next. So this was how, in Manahari, this was how the class set up. You'd have tables around the outside, and they had the information that we gave them. You have to to go to Nepal, you have to give the stuff about 6 weeks in advance, and then they take your English and translate it into Nepali and give it to them so that they have something to work from. And then I stood and taught, and then the interpreter would interpret what I was saying. Mealtime was interesting, as it's not quite the same as we do it. Those are dirt floors, and those are large woks, and they would just prepare all the food in the wok and then bring it to us. And I will say this, the food was delicious. I was a little afraid. You hear about Indian food and how hot it can be. I was a little afraid I was going to burn my mouth off for 2 weeks, but that wasn't the case at all. It was really good. And and very different. Not a type of food that I had ever eaten before, but it was delicious. But these are the ladies that did that. You can see rice in that one bowl. So they just prepared it in large containers. Next. Oh, yeah, the chicken, they didn't bone any of the chicken. And so it just they just cut it up and cooked it and put it on a plate. So you kind of had to work your way around stuff as you did it. For those of you who are interested in plumbing, thank you. This is a typical toilet in, you don't tell toilet jokes in church, right? But that's what you dealt with. And that's what they're used to. This is how they handle their hygiene issues. So next. The second place we went to is called Janakpur, and that's one of my colleagues. His name is Kevin Smith. Kevin and Jan and I were actually in the chorale together at Faith back in the day. He spent most of his time in Ohio and around Cedarville University, and he taught worship classes. And so this was a little different setting. This was chairs. And you can see the lady in the foreground with children. She had 2 children with her, and she was also taking the class. So it wasn't all just men. There were some ladies that were involved as well. Next. When I got there, I had a chart in English and another chart that was blank. In other words, it just had the lines. It had all the other stuff, but it just had the lines. And that first pastor I mentioned in Manahari said, "Would you like me to have that made up into a larger chart?" I said, "That'd be great." That was at the end of like the second day. He showed up the next morning with this 2-foot by 3-foot vinyl chart. It cost $6 to produce it, and it was all in the poly. And I was just flabbergasted and so appreciative, and the guys were so appreciative. They were coming up and looking at that and taking notes, and it was really neat that he was able to do that. So at the end of it, I said, Can you get another one of those for me? I want to take that to our next stop." "Yep, you got another one for me." And I left those with the people so that they would have them. I mentioned Hinduism. So what you have in Nepal is a lot of animals just roaming free. These are goats. Just keep kind of moving here. These are goats that are just wandering around. Next slide. Those are ducks and the ever-present motorbikes. Next slide. Those are monkeys. Monkeys, the people in Nepal kind of view monkeys like we view rats. They don't like them at all. But they're all over the place. On the road between Manahari and Janakpur, we saw monkeys all over the place. Next slide. Those are cows, and you see cows all over because, again, in Hinduism, the cow is sacred and represents a number of their different gods. Next slide. That's called a Brahma bowl, and you may be familiar with the word Brahma. And again, it connects directly to several of the Hindu gods, and you can see all those poles with the electricity all the way down the street there. Next slide. This is an elephant crossing. We have deer crossings and elk crossings. They have elephant crossings. In fact, they had a number of different crossings. I didn't get my camera out in time to snap the picture of the Bengal tiger crossing. When I saw that, I asked the guy with me, because I knew he'd come from northwestern Nepal, I said, "So you drove down here 14 hours. Did you have to drive some of that at night?" He said, "Oh, no. You can't drive at night because the tigers hunt at night. They are nocturnal creatures, and they hunt at night." I said, "How often do people get eaten?" He said, "About 25 or 30 times a year you'll hear about it." So I was really glad we were traveling during the day in an enclosed vehicle. But those kinds of things were all over the place as we traveled. Next slide. I put this in here just because I really love the colorful trucks. And it's also interesting to me that some of the stuff that's on the trucks is in English, even though most of the people can't speak English. But on the trucks, I don't know if you can read that on the front of that truck, but on the blue bumper, those words are in English. I can't even remember what they say now, but they're in English. Next. I mentioned graduating class. So you can see the teachers. They're the ones with the different colored in the middle. So we're in the middle of all of that. And then the students have their diplomas and their graduation stuff. And it was just really exciting for them and neat for us to be a part of that. Go ahead and go to the next slide. The first one was Manahari. This is the graduating class in Janakpur, and they had that stuff done up in English, I guess in part for our sake, because many of them don't speak English. But that was the first graduating ceremony for both of those student bodies. Next.
The robes and everything were provided by you.
Yes, we provided the robes and the hats and all that. They didn't do any of that. And then we brought our own stuff as well. They gave us all a gift when we left, and it was this really nicely framed thank you from them. Go to the next slide, and there it is. The Nepali flag up on the left, the symbol for Tri-M Ministries, which is part of what Tom Carr's, not only ABWE, but also Tri-M Ministries. And then just with appreciation, and I won't take the time to read all that, but just really a neat thing that they gave to us. I cherish that. It's on my wall at home as just a thank you for us coming and doing that for them. Next. You don't wear shoes inside in Nepal. It's again the cultural norms. You just don't do that. The man who's sitting to my left with the bare feet has taught in Manchuria. He has taught in Nepal. He has taught in Eastern Europe. He has taught all over the world. And brilliant guy. So there was him, and then the one to his left is a pastor in Ohio, and the one to his left is the Kevin Smith that I mentioned, was also in Ohio but is retired. And Kevin traveled, even though he is diabetic and had to have all of his stuff in a cooling container as he traveled, and he had to keep plugging that thing in at every airport, and but did the work. And then the other one that was part of our team was Tom Carr, and Tom is not in that picture. He's the one taking it. Next. The men that you see sitting there, I mentioned that in Nepal it's technically illegal for us to do what we were doing. It's not illegal for them to have a church and to teach Christian doctrine. It's illegal for people to come in from outside the country and teach Christian doctrine. So technically we weren't supposed to do what we were doing. But all the men that are sitting there are government officials. Some of them local government officials, some of them federal or national government officials, who all came for this graduation. And part of the reason is the pastor of the church, and that's the man that has standing up with the microphone, the pastor of that church is a connected guy. I mean, there's hardly anybody that's anybody in Nepal that he doesn't know. In fact, we had, for this graduation in Manahari, we had the person who sang for us would be similar to someone who was a top 40 chart type person in the United States. This person is known all over Nepal. Everybody knows this person. The pastor knows that person and invited them to come and sing as a personal favor, and the person did that. And so pretty cool that he was able to do that. This was their graduation gift from those of us who traveled there to teach. You can't really see what those are. One of them is a theology book, Grudem's Theology. One of them is a Bible atlas. That's probably, I forget now which one is which, but I think that's the one that's the two in the center, the one that's on the right. One of them is a concordance, and one of them is a study Bible. So they got a theology book, a study Bible, a Bible atlas, and a concordance as a graduation gift. For some of them, that's the first 4 books they have in their library, the only 4 books they have in their library, but it was a valuable thing to be able to pass along to them. Next. I guess that's it. I forget which one was next. All right, so questions that you might have, anything that about our ministry or about what we're planning to do, or about us, about our eating habits, whatever it is that you'd like to ask. Go ahead.
Stan, I'd just like to mention the fact that in the beginnings of Mountain Shadows Baptist Church, you and your church there in Colorado Springs was instrumental in helping us get through some hard times. And a lot of people here don't know that, how you helped supply, pulpit supply, and got people in here to really help us to get started. And I'm not sure that this ministry would be here without that help.
Well, the Lord allowed us to have a good relationship with the folks at Mountain Shadows. We knew Pastor Gordon. In fact, Pastor Gordon was in Kansas City, where my wife is from. So we had known Bill and Nancy from before they were here. And we just had a sense that this place was going to be a place that God was going to use. And we were glad to be able to partner. I told Pastor Lundquist, we came up over the hill on Purcell Boulevard and all those homes spread out. When we first were coming down to help you guys, none of those homes were there. Right? I mean, this is a 10-acre piece of land right here. The church was sitting on it, and you could get out binoculars to see the next house. And now it's, basically surrounded. And so God had a plan for what he was doing here. We were grateful to be a part of it. So, yes?
When you were mentioning access, do they have computer access, computers there, like to do YouTube or Zoom? You said some of them could do Zoom, but...
Well, Zoom in the Philippines. I did Zoom with them. In Nepal, in fact, I got WhatsApp on my phone because I couldn't call. And there are some places apparently in Nepal, although I wasn't in one, where you could access the internet through the computer. But in the two places where we taught, that wasn't the case. Philippines it is, or at least it was in the places where I was at, but not in Nepal.
So how do you get all your stuff over there if they really are watching you going there? You send it ahead? Like you said you bring materials or you supply the materials. How is that?
No, we had it in our luggage, and we took it with us in our luggage, and they didn't give us any difficulty with that.
Okay.
I don't know whether they gave them any difficulty in this last trip. I wasn't with them. They went in September, and that law passed, I think, in July. So they were on the front end of that law, and they didn't have. He said that the trip went off fine. So I didn't ask him for details, but we've just taken it over in our luggage. I know when we were. Jan actually had a chance to go to Europe with Dr. Kober from Faith Baptist Bible College. And they had to fill out manifests and list everything that was in their luggage. We didn't have to go through that.
That's surprising that might come to that sooner or later.
We could. Nepal actually became, they had an election just before we got there in 2024, and it became a communist country during that election. So we were there during the first week after they became a communist country, and there were some demonstrations. We just stayed clear of them. There were some people who were not happy about whatever it was that they weren't happy about, and they were demonstrating. We just stayed clear of all that. I will say that in Kathmandu, the capital, we could walk around freely because there's tourists there. They fly into Kathmandu and they'll go from there out to the Himalayas, climb K9 or Mount Everest or whatever it is that they're going to do. So that it's a staging point for that kind of thing. And there are tourists so we could walk around freely there. When we got to Manahari, they said, no, you get in the taxi and you go to the church, you get out of the taxi and you get in the church. You don't wander around and shop, because here you stand out like a sore thumb. And the majority Hindu people, some of them will be very angry about your presence. So just pretty much stay out of sight.
I got one other question.
Yes.
As far as your support and the money that you're going to need to take these trips, are you hoping to work through Baptist Missions?
Yes. Yeah. That hasn't been set up yet, so right now we have received a couple of gifts, and the church is just holding those for the moment. But our church does not want to be a clearinghouse for our ministry, and I get that. And it's just a lot of extra work for a non-paid treasurer to do all that kind of thing. So that's why one of the reasons I'm working with Baptist Missions, trying to get this global fit partners. They'll take care of the financial ins and outs, and also I can be held accountable, which I want. I want that kind of accountability to make sure that, that there's no question about how we're using funds that are given by God's people for this. Yes?
India has a large percentage of English-speaking people. Does Nepal?
There are some, as you notice that there's, in fact, if you're looking at some of the slides, there'll be English on some of the, but those are primarily in the capital city area. Most of the people who are in outlying areas don't speak English. They'll speak the native language, Nepali. So, but there are some. I mean, we had translators and for all of our classes, we didn't have any difficulty finding somebody who could translate. I say we, I didn't do that work, but Tom didn't have any difficulty finding people that would translate for us. But in the class, in the 2 classes that I taught, the only people that spoke English were the translators. Yes?
This is shifting gears, but maybe as you close things up, Curtis mentioned Rustic Hill's involvement in Mountain Shadows and the blessing that your church has been to us. I wondered if you could speak just for a minute about the future of Rustic Hills and what our partnership might mean going the other direction.
Scott Owen is going to be our interim pastor starting January 1st. And we've been talking with Scott since spring and going back and forth on what this would look like. And we had him, we talked to him via internet, and then we had him come to their church and talk with us about what this would look like. And when Baptist Church Planters does an interim work like this, they partner with a sister church in the area to support the interim and to minister alongside the church that's going through the process. If you've never been through a transition, a pastoral transition, it can be a difficult time for a church. And so Baptist Missions, our Baptist Church Planters wants the church that's hosting the interim to partner with another church in the area. You guys are the church we thought of. And Scott thought that was a great idea as well. Your connection with Baptist Church Planters not only it goes back a long ways, but is actively involved in the present through your pastor's ministry on the council. So I've actually brought some stuff for the pastor to look over and sign and send off to Scott that would make you a partner with Rustic Hills in helping us through this transitional period. Scott will be there through April. So the transition time frame for Baptist Church Planters to be involved is 4 months. If you know anything about churches looking for pastors these days, 4 months probably won't get the job done. We will probably be looking at another man, and I've got a fella, I've spoken with a guy that I know. He and I went to seminary together. His grandson was our summer intern this last year. About the possibility of picking up where Scott leaves off once we get to the 1st of May. So I think that interim connection is going to go on for a little while. I don't know how far this church's connection will be. The document that I brought along for Pastor Lundquist to examine is for the first 4 months, and then we'll see what goes on from there. But this is an opportunity to continue the connection between our churches. So, is that what you were thinking about? Well, thank you so much for the time. I really appreciate your allowing us to come and be a part of your ministries here this morning. And if you have any questions, further questions you want to ask, we'll be hanging around for a little bit. So, Lord bless you. Thanks, Pastor.
All right, we'll give you a chance to ask those questions here in just a second. One final time before you leave, don't forget, if you want to participate in the offering, go ahead and do that as you go, and just indicate it clearly. But so glad that you're here today, so glad to have Stan and Jan with us. And so they'll stick around, get a chance to talk with you if you didn't get a chance in between services, or if you have any more questions.
I left those things up there.
These?
Yeah.
So out on the table, you'll find the brochure as well as these really clever business cards that function as a gospel tract as well. And really neat thing. And maybe as a church, when we print our next church business cards, we might think about doing something like that. That's really clever. So those are out there. Grab those to pray for them and the ministry, and that God would provide for them in a way that allows them to do the kinds of things that they're really dreaming about now. So I'm going to ask you, would you stand with me as we close in a word of prayer? we're delighted to have you here, and we're excited about the potential to partner with Rustic Hills in those 4 months starting next year and wherever else, because we have really valued the partnership in gospel ministry with Rustic Hills and look forward to continuing that. So let's pray, and we'll close our time together, and then make sure that you thank the Lightfoots for their ministry with us this morning. Commit to pray for them moving forward as they follow the Lord into what He's leading them, and we'll just be excited to watch how that plays out. Father, we thank you for our time together this morning. We thank you once again for Stan and Jan and for their faithfulness in ministry and for their time with us this morning. I'd ask that you would provide for their needs through the love offering that's taken here, that you would raise up partners for them in the ministry that you're leading them into. We thank you for the impact that they've already had in Nepal and the Philippines, and there's so many opportunities moving forward. We pray for direction and wisdom for them. We pray that the details with being sent by Rustic Hills and Global Fit with Baptist Men Missions would work out with no other issues, and they'd be able to move forward knowing exactly what direction they're heading as they follow you. We pray also for the church in this time of transition and ask that you would make the time that Scott is with them, those 4 months, be really valuable in just setting the stage for the new guy and helping the church transition. A pastor staying for more than 30 years is very unusual, and so I thank you for the tenure, and now I pray that the church, as they move forward following you, trusting you to care for them, would see your hand in this and be encouraged by Scott's ministry and our being able to partner with them. We just look forward to that as well. So give us wisdom, strength, use us for your glory. For the rest of this day, there are still some things ahead of us in terms of truth trackers and youth group. Give us strength for those things as well. And I pray that this week you would give us eyes to see, ears to hear, that you give us hearts that are sensitive, that as we move forward throughout the events of this week, that you would bring people into contact with our lives that might need to hear of the hope of the gospel, might need to be encouraged by the truths of your word. Help us to be faithful to look for ways to impact eternity as we go about life, and I pray it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, thank you for being here. We'll see you at Truth Trackers Youth Group. Otherwise, thank the Lightfoots for being here.